Okay. It's kind of a game, but that's only because I'm on PC. Yeah, so the idea is I'm using an app called Spatial, and in here you can import whatever you want and design spaces for yourself to walk around in. In VR, this looks a lot more fun because then you can become the person and walk around. But you can look at this also on your phone or on a laptop. So you could access it a bunch of different ways. Yeah, I think mine.
Can I be little guy?
It has my face on it currently. Like really bad.
Does that have your pain though?
No, yeah, sad. But you can pick a couple different characters. So yeah, the idea is you could, have like 30 people walking around a digital exhibition, and you could do this like very rogue. You don't have to have a space for it. So if we're interested in this, we could shoot for this at the end of the semester and put our work like in a space that we design. We would just have to design like what that space looks like. The idea, I guess, would be doing an exhibition on a date at a time, but just like put a million flyers up with a QR code to like access it. And then you can
replicate.
We could. Yeah, I used to have a Minecraft file of it, but I don't know where it went. But yeah, we definitely could. Which might be interesting if we have QR codes for an exhibition in Burchard, and then it's like you're in Burchard with stuff everywhere. Like we could really like just rogue.
You just turned to me and goes, "You should all have RJ space."
Oh,
all of the
Thanks for
characters.
just
you could.
Which makes sense. For anyone that like joins the exhibition, I feel like that would be concerning.
It'd be like a cult.
Kind of funny though.
Yeah. This class is a
Yeah, yeah. Pretty much, which I love.
oh.
Yeah, I didn't bring any drinks in today just because of other cult issues.
Oh my
No
God.
punch today.
No punch, sadly. Yeah. And we're not in the Amazon. But yeah, if this space was really easy to redesign, well, weren't they the Heaven's Gate cult? Isn't that the one that did
It's
the
Heaven's
Kool-Aid?
Gate and Jim Jones.
Yeah, and weren't they like in a forest? Not a forest.
Yeah, Jonestown was
Jones-
in the Guyana, in the middle of the Amazon.
Yeah, see Amazon.
Okay, okay.
I know my cult.
Oh my God.
970 people.
That's
Impressive.
that's impressive.
Okay, moving on. Yeah, Burchard would be really easy to digitally double because it's just columns and a ceiling. And then we can just like, I don't know, take over someone's studio and put a massive sculpture in the middle of it.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we can do whatever we want. Yeah.
It's like a hot box without a ceiling.
Mm.
Anytime you talk, it just goes straight up. You can't do it.
Yeah, but if you stand in the middle, it has weird activities.
It does.
There's one good spot
Yeah,
and 99
yeah.
bad spots.
Yeah.
That's
that
what
one
it
was
stays there.
So I like that. It's like spray painting a building, but like digitally for Burchard. Or we just do what we want with it. I'm into it.
Into a jungle gym
We could.
with like cool stuff. Not just like normal monkey bars.
Really cool thing.
Super monkey lunch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Big ones.
Yeah.
Everybody
Massive.
just some ice for your house.
Thank you.
Then you finally see the shark.
guy. You should put that in there.
So it's a question of how much do we want to design a space and like stuff to put in it, or do we just want to do the old boring final project?
Everything.
You could do everything. So I'll show you around.
With all my-
I'll do it from like
I have
character
no
view.
fear.
It's fun.
Don't worry, I'll help you.
So yeah, you can do whatever you want with this. This is just like the entrance room. I don't like this. I'm gonna zoom into my face. So here's like a little model of it. Currently we're in this structure, but I have like 4 other rooms and an atrium. Yeah, we should. Okay, I didn't expect that. I guess you can move things, but yeah. So basically, in VR, you would be walking around in the headset, which would look really cool. But you could also connect to this through your phone. I apologize for the quality. It wasn't running on anything better. But I did this as an exploration a few years ago for a fashion show that we did. So basically, just to give you a gist of what's possible. Imagine this is Burchard, and then we could have different sections with different pieces of art in them or sculptures or whatever you want to make. So the idea behind this one, the show that we did was we had these 3D printed pieces on people. So we just put them all digitally on mannequins in here. So I have like a little couch. Yeah, it's kind of back rooms. We could do more though. I barely furnished this place, so it's mostly empty.
It's like go with the doors and it leaves the other places. There's
But yeah, we could do a lot with it. Let's sprint around.
you can move before the class. Everything.
Yeah, so that's like the gist of it. And we could do a lot with this space. So it's kind of up to us what we want to put in. Oh, there's a little sculpture in here I forgot about. I'm stuck in a wall, so that's as much as we're going to talk about. But you get the gist.
How easy would it be to import the little guy as my?
Oh, it'd be really easy. I could probably do it right now. But I have to get unstuck first. So this happened to me when I was setting this up yesterday. But I've forgotten how to get back. So
You do a vote.
wait. I walked. Okay, I'm outside. Yeah. Okay, so we can do some parkour too.
Oh, wow.
You're really good at finding.
Thank you.
You know, you just come up with a stick.
Makes me nervous.
Ah.
Oh, God. No
Yeah.
fall damage.
Nah, we're good.
Turn me dust.
Yeah, so that's kind of the gist of what we could do, and we just use this to make Bircher digital and then put stuff in it.
Yeah,
So-
I like that.
Yeah, fun. So it's a question of how we want to split up designing different parts of Birchard. Is anyone keen on doing Birchard? I feel like that's a one task. I don't know. Unless people have like backroom ideas, we could add on to it.
That would be.
But I could just do Birchard if unless someone wants to do it. But I could just do like the space and then we can just add your stuff into it. Yeah. So we can probably forego the 3D printing aspect unless you really want to 3D print stuff. We still could. But with this direction, we can explore a lot more with materiality in a digital space and then like how to convert that to something we can play around with. So it's not just white clay all the time.
Is there a way we can incorporate? Because I think I really would like to be able to 3D print
Mhm.
stuff, but like maybe, I don't know how we can merge the
Mm-hmm.
middle.
I mean, I like that point. There would be an interesting thing we could do if we digitally double this space and then also 3D print things.
Yeah.
There is like a physical installation in Bircher that links you to the digital.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we could like, I don't know, ask someone if we can put a pedestal like next to their desk with your thing on it and
Yeah.
then just have a code on there that you could scan.
Yeah.
And then we can leave that up for a week or something.
That'd be cool.
That'd be fun.
That's
So
cool,
yeah, I'm down.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you guys want to do it, that's cool. Oh yeah, and then putting in little guy. Yeah, we can figure that out. Yeah, because there's a way to upload things, but I think I created this mostly in VR. Well, add content, upload. It is quite easy though. So if we like if I put together the digital space and then share like the link with everyone, you could just go in whenever and just add content to it. If you have an editor role. So let's see.
So it's the.
Yeah, I think this one has the color on it.
Can you like take things out of the room? But could you steal stuff?
Yeah, I think
Put it in your backpack.
you're gonna heist my museum. I think there's a way to like have different editor roles.
Mm.
So I could give you all like content editor and then everyone else is like viewer. But yeah, I think I could pull stuff around and just like really move the space.
Hide and seek.
Oh my god, hide and seek. That'd be really fun.
Oh,
So everyone,
I saw it come in. Where'd it go? Where'd it go?
is it in the sculpture?
Oh, it is. Wait, we're missing.
Why is it just there?
Unless he went somewhere else. Kinda, yeah.
My armor.
Let's try it again. Nope,
Also, that
still the
cake was
armor.
So good, RJ,
What?
that cake.
Oh, good.
I had
I
some.
haven't tried it yet.
It was here and
And then
I
it,
thought you
like,
just.
my-
That was so good. It's gone.
Oh, okay, I have a chair now. Yeah, it's like a laser cut bench idea, you know,
That's cool.
which we'll actually do next week, I think.
Anything
Yeah,
with
in
chair.
Grasshopper.
Shit, like the bench and the limestone. It's not big.
No. Yeah. Yeah, so clearly there's a lot we could explore with this because I'm not doing something right because there should be color and the scan of Austin.
What
So
about the STL?
yeah, I could try that. But yeah, this is like some other stuff we can go over is like how to process it correctly for game engines. Which like the GLB file is technically for game engines, so that one should work really well.
I thought it was an FBX.
Yeah, I tried to put in the FBX. I don't know where the body went. But this should just be the scan of you. I forget what STL had. But we can try STL. Okay, we can't do STL. It's good to know. But we should be able to do GLB files.
Lava fine.
What's that?
GLB.
Yep. Nice. Yeah, all the color. Okay. Let me try to turn the settings up a little bit. So we can't see anything. Okay. Okay, we're in the roof again.
Love it.
Yeah. Let's hop back in. Okay. That's pretty interesting.
Oh my god.
We should do scans of all of us and just have them like in a circle where like wherever someone drops in, they're just staring at them.
When they spawn in, it's just a circle and
I love that.
be giant.
Yeah.
Do like a room, like, there's like a soft spot on the floor where if you walk over.
I don't like this.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
That's pretty great.
That's very stuff.
We definitely could. It's just too weird.
I like the models in the background.
Mm-hmm.
I like your like idle pose.
It's kind of sick.
It's kind of yeah, it's very slick.
I know.
He's like, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
RJ.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
wear all black. That means
Means what?
I'm that cool.
Nice. Okay, cool. So that's fun. I think next week, well, for the rest of today's class, we'll do a quick Grasshopper thing. Next week, it's up to you if you want to do Grasshopper. I was going to do the laser cut bench, or we could just work on your models and do this.
I'm gonna do that.
Take a vote. You want to do this?
Wait, which
Yeah.
which thing is which? Sorry.
The TV screen thing. You
Oh.
can just work on like your projects next week, or do you want to do more Grasshopper?
Let's do this.
Okay, all for this.
Which one is this?
That's not this. This one.
The
But like, do your projects and work on your own thing and work on Bertrand.
Okay, yeah.
And okay, so A.
I
or
thought
nay?
you kept pointing to the back.
Okay, that's good enough. Oh no.
I was like,
That's I get you though.
little guy. Like, what I mean.
Okay. So if that's cool, next week I can work on Bertrand and then we can work on your project in class and however you want to do it. And we can start like, yeah, modeling stuff. So sick. Okay. I need to leave this really quick. Today? Well, I had my master's class for most of the day and then I bought food. So yeah. We're gonna after 7 p.m. just don't try to find me.
Okay.
Yeah. Or do. I don't know. There's not that many bars in Blacksburg. So. Okay.
What if did you ever 3D print Roadmap?
Not yet. Yeah. We can print a lot.
I do want to print a lot.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that could be possible.
I'll do this. Okay, so let's do some Grasshopper. Leah, were you able to figure out?
Yeah, it's great.
Nice.
Several pages. Anytime I open it, I just like open it.
Sean, what are you doing?
I'm looking at you, Brandon.
Nice.
There's some crazy stuff in.
I think we're words squiggle.
Yeah, that one's
Mesh
fun.
inflation.
That one's fun. But we already did Kangaroo, so can only get to so much. Okay.
Inflation shoe.
Yep.
Oh, Chris.
Crystalline shoe. Okay, so today we're making a shoe.
Yeah.
Let me open up this other file.
You said you
I
think
dropped it in
this
the whole episode.
works?
Crystalline should be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, if you don't see it, let me know. Because you don't technically need the plugin for it to work.
Okay.
But yeah, this is the goal for today, is to kind of do that, the midsole texture, so the lattice structure for that. And then I'm gonna give you this Rhino file because it has the upper and this middle bridge part. We can talk about how to make those pieces because it's just, well, it's with the sub D tools in Rhino 7, so we can discuss it. But yeah, you need 7 to do that.
Yeah.
So, or you could do it in Blender because they have very similar tools. But I'm just gonna give it to you. Okay, so if you grab that Rhino file and open it up, it should have the mesh in there that you need.
No.
Wait, yes.
I mean, actually, it would be.
I can't not overhear you, so
It was great.
it was pretty gross, yeah.
Did you hear the first part of it?
Uh-huh.
Okay, yeah. Joe Rogan's like on the show. It's like he was talking about it a lot. He was like, yeah, that was like not okay.
Actually, with the people that have Rhino 6, let me know if it opens
Yeah.
correctly.
I mean, it wasn't.
It does not. Okay, let me fix that then. Because you guys don't have sub Ds at all, yeah.
It has to be saved.
Oh, I have a converter. If
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
There's one.
Yeah, I can save it out as 6. I was more interested in if the sub Ds will come up. Um,
It's been a long day.
yeah, I know it has, yeah.
I haven't done anything on there, but it's still been on. I skipped my physical class. Then did laundry and built the top words. This one was good.
Yeah, I'll put a Rhino 6 there in a second. I'm just gonna change some things around just because sub Ds I don't think will work.
Monsoon. Of this product I did, and we're gonna have to buzz like this all the time, and like there's synchronized lighting, yeah, it's very nice. And then dumpster and then rain sludge.
Nice. What a line.
And it's the radio concert. So then you feel it there and you get so much stuff. That was good.
Okay, grab that Grasshopper. It should work in any Rhino.
Does it matter if we, okay.
Yeah,
That one.
there's just meshes in the Grasshopper file to start with.
The second one.
Yeah, the .gh one.
Wow.
Yeah, I had like 10 different companies like that and I still.
But the Grasshopper file I gave you is blocked.
Yeah, it,
It says GH Python assembly. I'm just gonna press
and
yes.
it's a lot of files and I tried like 15 times and it's still going. Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
I don't know what to do.
Well, if you force quit Rhino, it should go away. Like the error message.
I'm just gonna click.
Okay.
If it's for different files.
It is for different files and some of them I click no. I
Wait,
don't know what to
Just
do
spice it up.
now.
wait, it's always a different file name?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Like what's the file name?
libraries, Fennec, regions.githy, remove materials.githy,
Yeah, it was like all of
remove
them.
placeholders.
I had to just delete everything off of my computer.
With the but all I gave you
Everything.
Yeah, not everything, but everything in the folder.
with the Grasshopper file, but there's only 4 meshes in there.
The one you just sent us, I just opened mine.
I
Okay.
think it's the Fennec.
What?
Yeah, it's
That was-
finished.
Oh,
For
it's
some
the
reason.
plugin causing an issue.
Yeah.
Huh.
I had to delete it.
oh,
Oh.
I'm done.
Okay.
But
Is all
I don't know if the nodes
Mhm.
just like got their back or if they're deleted. Because I clicked no a couple of times.
Well, all I gave you was 4 meshes. Like there's nothing else in this file. So it should be pretty simple, I was assuming, because this has worked before, but weird.
Try to open the file, just the file. I go to file.
No.
Thank you. Take something at going 1 speed and make it go 120 times less speed.
And then,
It's like a gear.
Or did you
I don't like
did Fennec for
The
the
big gear.
No, you shouldn't.
The big
If it's
gear.
not gonna work, then it'll be fine.
So it's like the input is the small gear, the output's the big gear. You get a bunch of torque. That's the same.
I was supposed to go on the sheet.
It's like 4. How big is that?
Depending on
It's like.
Like I have 60 about. But I think. I might have everything like that.
Okay. It is. Like. By. Yeah. It's solid steel.
Does everyone have Crystalline though as a plugin that they can see? Leah, do you have it?
I tried to. I don't think it's work, but I'm none of it.
Where will it be?
I don't know, I'm looking that I'm just cutting.
There you go.
Just try everything out and see if it
To the plugin thing. Crystal?
Yeah, Crystalline.
Fun fact.
It's the
I
plugin.
opened the file,
25% plugin.
but I didn't bring the plugin.
Oh,
This is a lesson point sheet, man.
do you see the plugin up top on Grasshopper? Okay. Yeah, Leah, download this one, the one I just put up. But yeah, just the newest one. So the components of Crystalline is a lattice-based plugin, so it can do a lot of lattice structures. The nice thing about it though is that these are all they're not like plugin components, they're all just clusters of other Grasshopper components. So if you want to dive into them, you can see how it was built. But because they're just Grasshopper components, you should just be able to open the file with the components in it, and you'll still have it even if the plugin's not working,
Okay, yeah,
which is nice. So let me know if that works and you can see them.
I think, I mean, I see the shoe.
You see this part in there? Or,
Yes,
okay, cool. Yeah, it should work then.
yay.
Yeah.
I don't see crystal in the plugin.
Okay, yeah, it
It seems like whatever that stuff is.
Mhm.
now,
yeah.
Like the plugin itself at the top. is there.
Yeah, the plugin should be up at the top. But if you don't see the plugin up at the top, just download the most recent thing in Discord.
That's what it is.
Oh, okay. And you see them on the canvas?
I see the components.
Okay.
But I don't see crystal on it.
That'll work, it'll work for today,
Okay.
because we can just use the ones I have here. But yeah, if you want to keep using the plugin, there's a lot more in the plugin than just this. But you'll have to see if you unblocked it correctly and if the files were just in the correct spot. It's probably just a simple issue like that it's not popping up, because you have a Windows computer, so it should be fine. Okay, everyone else, everything is working so far? You got it all open? Cool. So yeah, we're gonna take the shoe form and convert that into the final model that I showed a second ago with the midsole, with the parametric texture on the bottom. To start off, there's a few ways to make the meshes that I gave you. Right now, the most detailed ones are going to be the upper, and then this, let's see, this kind of spanner in the middle. Those are both made with the sub-D tools in Rhino 7. So if you have Rhino 7, we do have the sub-D panel where you can, I'll show this quickly and also show it in Blender, because you can do a very similar thing if you don't have 7. But in 7, you can create any primitive. I would recommend like grabbing the box primitive is the easiest one. And then you can come in and actually move this box to make it look more like that green piece. So working with sub-Ds in Grasshopper, if you hold down Control-Shift on the keyboard, then you can click on certain components of a sub-D. If you just left-click, it'll just do everything. But Control-Shift, I can select certain sections and then pull them out to get a different look. So doing that, you can quickly get to something like what I have down there. And it doesn't have to be a solid form like this. You could just do a surface, like for that shoe. So if you're going for something 3D, I would recommend starting with the sub-D box. It's super easy, super simple. If you want to do a surface, you could start with the sub-D plane. And it's just a 2D shape. And then you can take that, and it took a while to get to this point. But same process applies. You can move it into place, and then holding Control-Shift, we can move around certain elements of it to get a different look. If you want to add more faces, and I would recommend adding a lot more faces to this, there's only so much you can do with 4 quadrants of a shape. If you do Control-Shift and select 2 lines, it's the same thing that we looked at on one of the first days, like with the gumball. You can move the surface, or you can use the little tiny circle to add more. And then when you add more, you can keep rotating and keep adding to your surface. There's probably, well, there is a good way to do it for a shoe. There's a clean topology way to do it. I would probably start just with a band going around the outside and then filling in the bottom and then adding more as you go up and down with the shoe. But it's kind of up to you, however you think is best to model with surfaces. But that's kind of the basic gist of it. If you wanted to model, you could play with surfaces and move them around. We can do this in Blender as well if you don't have Rhino 7. It's pretty much the exact same process. It's just the UI is going to be slightly different. So I'll show you that when that pulls up. Okay, so in Blender, you can add shapes in a similar way to Grasshopper. If you want to add anything, and we might have gone over this before, but I'm not sure. But if you want to add stuff, up in the top, as soon as you open a fresh Blender file, we can also add in a plane from the mesh tab. So this looks, starting off, quite similar to the sub D tool in Rhino. One thing we can do, because if we saw the sub D tool, when we add in a plane, we get those rounded corners. It's not a perfect square. So in Blender, to enable the sub D mode, we can add a modifier to the surface. Right now, it's just a flat surface. We do have this modifier tab over on the right side, and we can add a subdivision modifier, so the name tracks, and that'll make it more of a rounded shape. To start editing this shape, if you want to add more loops or like edges to it, make it more complex, we can do that in edit mode. So right now we're up in object mode. So if we switch over to edit, we'll have the control point of the vertices. So we can move them around, turn on the gumball, and we can rotate them with the gumball, or with pressing R on the keyboard, we can rotate. And then we can add more faces. So the gumball in Rhino was nice because we could move that little circle. In Blender, if you hit E on the keyboard, that'll add another face. I'm trying to figure out what E stands for. Yeah, there it is. So it'll extrude, and then we can keep doing that, rotating, moving, scaling, anything you want to get more of a complex shape. At this point, it doesn't look too smooth, and you can update the modifier to make it look a little bit better. So we could add more levels of subdivision to get to a higher poly count. One other thing we can do visually, just note, if you 3D print, you're going to get this shape, but visually, if we go to object, we can shade smooth, and then it looks perfectly smooth. But for printing, it's best to keep it flat, and we can just up this subdivision level to get smoother and smoother surfaces. So that's the way to do it if you don't have Rhino 7. But that'll get us basically the starting shapes that I have in the Rhino canvas. So going to the workflow, if you have Crystalline, or if you opened up the file that I shared with everyone. Okay, so we're going to start with, actually, we'll start with thickening the shoe first. So if you notice, the second mesh is going to be the shoe upper form. Right now, it's just a surface, so it has 0 thickness to it. The first thing we can do with this one is add some thickness to it so that we can start meshing it with the rest of the shoe. It's quite easy to do that. We can do an offset mesh. And since we have a mesh that I shared with everyone, we can easily offset it with this component. The way I was originally working was with sub Ds. So I still had like controllability over the sub D in Rhino. Whereas with the mesh, it's a little bit harder to control if I want to make updates later on. But you know, that's just a workflow thing. For today, we're just working with the meshes I gave you. The Fennec plugin had an offset component for sub Ds, which isn't something that comes with Grasshopper. So if you want to offset a sub D data type, you can do that with Fennec. But since we're keeping it simple, we can easily offset a mesh. And I think this is a pufferfish command, yeah. So that'll offset the mesh. So we can wire the mesh into the mesh input there, and then we'll get automatically a thickness. We can control the thickness with a slider in the distance. And you can do that if you want. So
Happy birthday.
thank you. But the number of 1 looks pretty good to me right now. So you can add a slider if you really want to. I think everyone knows how to do that at this point.
Does this close the mesh?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So by default, it does. If you look at the C input at the bottom of this component, that's create solids. You could set that to false, and then it would just offset the surface without closing it off. But that is a good question. You could also extrude both sides. So that's with the B input. So you could just do a negative of whatever's going into D, and then that'll do like extruding off both sides. So it's more even.
What toggle to false in that one?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. So that's the best way to ever do a true false input, is to just grab toggle. And then if I go to false, then it's now just exporting the offset surface and not the whole thing. For this one though, the goal is to use dendro to union the upper to that middle piece and then to the midsoles on the front and the back. So we'll use dendro at the end to put everything together. But if we know we want to use dendro at the end, we'll have to have everything as a mesh with thickness to it so that we can create a volume and then use that volume to union everything together. So that's why we're offsetting it as a solid. So the third mesh icon, that already has a 3D mesh in it, so we don't have to do any extruding to get that to be solid. It already is quite solid. So we'll come back to that as we go into the meshing steps later. But to actually look at what Crystalon can do, there's a lot of components that come with it. We'll only touch on a few today. Right now, the easiest way that I found to make a lattice structure is to use, let's see, if I click on this top one, we can see that we can, similar to what pufferfish can do, tweening between surfaces. We touched on that with the twisted box workflow. We can do a similar thing here where we can control the density of the lattice structure with how many meshes we have in between. So if we have these 3 meshes, we'll do one lattice structure between the bottom one and the middle one, and then a second between the middle and the top. So the first and the last mesh input both have 3 of those surfaces there. The crystalline component that we'll be using is this mesh between mesh component, so we can construct a lattice structure between. If you hover over that, you can see what's all going on inside because it is a, what is it called? It is a cluster, so there's just Grasshopper more inside of this. If you want to edit it, you could actually look inside to what's all going on, but I'm not going to click on that right now. But the basics with this one is we need meshes to morph or to tween in between of them. And then the other thing is we can switch between triangles and quads depending on what kind of cleanliness we want for the model. And then the last one here, which is going to be more fun, is we can control the number of divisions. So like the number of lattices in this mesh. So it's easy right now with the mesh I gave you. It already has 3 meshes in it. And those are in order. It's important to go in order just with everything we've done in this class. So if I start at the bottom, then I go bottom, middle, top, would work well. So you can pull this over closer if you want, or if you're doing this from scratch, if you find the MBM component in Crystalon, you can pull that in. It's not going to do anything yet. We have to fill in the other 2 inputs. So the first one, triangulate or quad. If ever it's asking you for one or the other, it's more than likely going to be a toggle Boolean. And in this case, it says false if mesh or quads. So we'll grab a toggle component so we can define that. And we'll just keep it at false because quads, in my opinion, are slightly cleaner for doing these kinds of lattices. And then the last one is that lowercase t input. And the lowercase t input usually denotes a parameter. In this case, it's going to be a range as it asks from 0 to 1. And with this range, we can control how dense the lattice is going to be. So a range, if you remember, is a little bit more complex than just a slider. It's going to be a whole list of values, but we can control it with a slider still. So to set up a parameter range, we can use the range component. The range will take a domain and a number of values to put within that domain. So we'll grab the default black and white range. As you bring this component in, the domain that's set in here is automatically 0 to 1, which is perfect for our use case because the crystalline component only wants a range of values from 0 to 1. So by default, that's nice. The one thing we can change though is the number of steps. By default, it's at 10. So I'm going to plug this into the parameter value from Crystalon, and we can see it start to update there. But we can control this density with a slider in the range. So by default, it's 10. But we can do a slider, say 10 is too much. We can just go from 1 to 10 as a slider, and then we can have some control below that range. You can go above 10 if you want. It's up to you. But we can plug that slider into n. So n is going to be the number of steps. If we look at the output, let me get a panel, and you don't have to do this, but if we look at the output of the range, as we move the slider, you'll see we'll get more values in between 0 and 1, and they're all evenly spaced with this component. One thing to note is it's always going to give you a number of values 1 above whatever the slider is. So if the slider is set at 4, we're going to get 5 values coming out. And that's just how it works. But if we look back at the crystalline component now, as I change this value, we can see that the number of times we tween between each of the surfaces will grow.
But that doesn't work if you don't have this one.
It should work even without the plugin,
Okay.
just because the crystalline plugin is made up of simple Grasshopper components. All they did was put them in a component and then upload it as a plugin. But compared to all the other plugins we've looked at, which are all packets of Python code, this is just packets of Grasshopper. So it should work. Is it working for you?
Oh,
Is it working out?
yeah.
Cool, cool. Nice.
So like dark.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so at this point, what we've basically done is constructed a twisted box. If you remember from the pufferfish workflow when we did twisted boxes, it's the same thing here. So we have those 3 meshes now converted into a volume of boxes controlled by our slider. So in this case, my slider is set at 3, and it looks like we have kind of 3 rows of boxes going up. And they've morphed to the topology of the surfaces. So that surface that interfaces with the foot the most is the most curved. So if we look at like a side view, you can see how it's being morphed as it goes between the 2 surfaces. So it's really easy to control. If you just change the input surface, you'll get a much different output without too much effort. So once we're at that point, we can actually start filling this with a texture or an infill. And we can select that pattern with this section I have up at the top. So the unit cell selector has a lot going on in it. Let me see. If I put it to a checklist, we have all these different options of what we can do with it. If you remember back to Mesh Plus, when we were doing the Twisted Box workflow as well, we could use Mesh Plus to define what kind of volume we wanted inside the Twisted Box. And it was a very similar setup to this. In Mesh Plus, we could pick which volume we wanted from this list. In this case, we have a selector that we can just flip in between. Right now, and all this component is let's see. All it is a value list or a digit scroller. They're kind of the same thing. It's like a different way to do a number slider, just with increments. So you could set this up by yourself, but the one I've given you is the one from Crystalline. This is the one that's set up with their very specific values coming out. So you can see as we change this, it's basically just outputting a different integer value that Crystalline knows is a different thing. So that's all it's doing. It's just named nicely so we know what's going on. With this sense, though, with the CT component, if you look inside, we can see basically it's a lot of meshes of different volumes. And then with the unit cell selector, we're just selecting which one we want to fill in the twisted box. So it is pretty much exactly the same thing as what we were doing in the pufferfish twisted box workflow. It's just that they put this all in components for us. So that's the nice thing about plugins. With that, if we preview on the CLF component. So we're filling the voxels with cells. It should be outputting a lot of curves. By default, right now we have the primitive cubic selected. So it's just gonna give us a solution that's the same as the twisted box, which we don't need for this. If you switch through the unit cell selector though, we can see a bunch of different textures coming up, represented as curves in Rhino. So there's a lot of different settings. Which one? Ooh, I do like that one, yeah. Yeah. So you can pick whichever one you want. It should work for this. There is a point though when you get through the list that the workflow might break, but I'll leave that up to you to find. I forget what the cutoff point is. Okay, yeah, it's the shell ones. I don't know what exactly those are, but it's not working for this workflow. So anything before the shell option should work just fine. Yeah, ask you for a new component. Yeah. You don't have too much fun with it. So if you found a pattern you like, we'll have to do the same thing for the heel part of the shoe. And I have the same component or the same two components in the Grasshopper file that I shared. So it's going to be the same process of setting up those two components. So you could even copy over the toggle and the range and the slider and move it down to the other MDM. And that should set up the pattern on the back as well. You can play with the slider between the two. They don't have to be the same number. They could be different. They could also be different patterns if you really want. If you want to change the pattern on the front versus the back, you would just have to duplicate the value sequencer and then the CT component and just have a second one for the bottom part of the script as well.
Do you want to make a connection then?
If you want to undo a connection, you could right click on,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and then you can disconnect.
When you go on facing.
Yeah.
It's a good thing, it's not staying plugged in, it's just copying itself.
Right. So if you copy inputs, they're not going to stay plugged in to their child. But if you duplicate like a child, it'll take the parent connections with it. Yeah.
Child.
It's the technical term for yeah, no, we don't use that one anymore.
What about without the connections?
I don't know if there is a way to duplicate without, like if I was to copy and paste this one, it would take the connections with it.
Yeah.
What I would recommend is just like if I want to grab this component again, just search for it again. Yeah. There might be a way to do it though. I just don't know.
Okay, how do I get both things to be the selection that I did on the unit cell stuff?
You like for both to be the same texture. As long as this is plugged into both of the U values, it should be showing the same.
Oh, it's good to be.
Yep.
Idea.
Yeah, so on the CLF component, so the one that fills it with cells, if you look at the inputs, the first one is just asking for what kind of cell to populate, and then V is going to be the kind of the twisted box voxels to populate. So this U and V is different from the surface U and V from before, but just what they named it. So yeah, this workflow today, I mean, is quite short. There's still more to go, but for generating the cells, this is like the easiest setup you can do just because they've done most of the work for us. So no reason to work hard when you can take someone else's work and work smarter. So yeah, exactly.
I should this whole class.
Yeah, because like if you really like, I mean, next class we could take a look at how this is working, but you know, that's like 100 different components. I'm like, I'm good doing the plug and away. So now that we have the voxel cells on the front and the back, we can convert those to pipes like meshes and then union everything together. Right now, if we look at the output, it's a bunch of curves. And with the curves, we can create geometry straight from them. The easiest way, we could use the pipe component in Grasshopper, but that's not going to get us any closer to our end goal. Our end goal is to union everything together with Dendro. And with Dendro, it comes with a component that we can convert curves straight into volumes. So at this point, we'll start converting the curves and the offset mesh, and then the mesh from that middle piece all into voxels so we can union them together. It's not too complex. We'll need one curve to volume component to handle the curves, and then a separate mesh to volume to handle the meshes of the upper and that middle piece.
What plugin is that?
Dendro. Yeah, we've used Dendro in the past, but without it, you could maybe Boolean things together. It's just the voxel workflow is a lot cleaner.
Is that one that is good for run on 6?
Yeah, yeah, it should be good for Rhino 6 and for Mac as well. Yeah, if you remember how to set up the Dendro components, because I mean, I use this with every workflow, so we've used it a couple times in the past, but we have the volume to mesh and the curve to mesh, but we'll need a settings value to actually define the voxel scale for both of these components. So again, for any Dendro workflow, you always have like one main settings component, and that'll control the settings for every single X2 volume. So you'll need to have the same settings going into every thing to volume component. With setting up the settings, it's not too complex because all we really need to do is put an input integer for the voxel size, or you could do a float value as well. Let me see. Yeah, in this sense, we can set up a smart way to do this instead of just putting a voxel number in and calling it a day. Since we have a volume or a curve to volume component, the curve to volume needs a radius value, but that radius value has to be 33% larger than the settings, just so you get some detail out of that curve. So we could use two sliders, one for the radius and one for the settings, but we can also do it slightly smarter with some math. And you'll only run into this issue if you get an error with it, so I'm just preempting that error. But take it as fact, the radius for the curve has to be 33% larger. So we can set up a multiplication to just do that calculation for us. So if we grab a multiplication component, you can type in star and that'll get it in the easiest way, or you could type in multiplication, whichever way you want to get it. With this, we can use one slider for the radius and then automatically convert those numbers to a volume setting that will work correctly. So we can use a slider. I'm going to do 0.1 to 1 as my slider. That should be pretty good for this scale that we're working in. So if we add the slider to the first input, we can add a multiplication number to go smaller for the setting. So if we multiply by 0.34, just rounding up to be safe, this will take our radius value, cut it into a third, and then we can use that as the voxel setting so we get good detail on the curves. You could do a slider or you could do a panel for this, but we're never going to change this number So it might be best to do a panel for 0.34, but up to you, whichever way you get the value.
How,
Yeah.
what is the AXP, sorry, I was.
Which one? Oh, yeah, so if you search just for the star, yeah, it'll come up. Yeah. Okay, so now that we set up a simple conversion, we can use the slider as a radius. So that'll go straight into the radius input for volume, curve to volume. And then since we know that the settings have to be 33% smaller than whatever the radius is, the multiplication is taking care of that conversion. So we can plug the multiplication output into that settings value. And this will just make our lives a little bit easier as we move this slider later on. But at this point, the settings component is all accounted for, so we can plug that into both the volume curve and the volume mesh. Okay, so with this little volume set, now we can start plugging in the curves and the meshes, each to their respective components. So with both of the CLF components from Crystalon, those are all the curves. So we can merge those into one set, and we can use the merge component to group these together. I'll be careful with my language because we don't want to actually group them. We just want to merge them into a list. There's a different component called group. So merge, if you look at the output, is going to put all of the curves into one long list. So now there's over 3,000 curves. If we group everything together, it's kind of like in Photoshop, I guess, if you take everything and put it in a folder. Oh, yeah, you're engineering, right? Okay. Yeah, for everyone else in the room.
Whoa.
If we take a look at the output now, it has a group with 3,000 objects in it. So now this is one line of data, whereas the merge is all of the 3,000 lines of curves. So you can pipe curves, but you can't pipe a group. You'd have to ungroup it back to curves, and then you could add the pipe to it. The group is nice though if you want to like really compact things and then transfer it. Like it won't, the order won't get mixed up because it's like in a group. I use it sometimes, but not sparingly. So yeah, we've merged the curves together. We can also merge the meshes together. So if you look back at the beginning, we have the offset mesh, and then we just have that singular mesh component. If we merge both of those together, that'll be all of our meshes taken care of. So that should be the upper and then that middle piece. Does that make sense? I'll zoom out for a second. Okay, everyone got it all merged together. Okay, so at this point we have the meshes in one merge and then the curves in the other. We can wire these in to their respective mesh to volume and curve to volume, and I should convert these into the volumes that we desire. My wires are crossing over, which isn't the cleanest way to work, but it should be visible enough.
So what makes the? pipe- Is that the?
Yeah,
master
so
volume?
the-
it
the
takes a curve, we take that radius and then go, okay, I'll make everything.
Yep. It's one less step than making it a pipe and then using that mesh to make a volume. It just does it all for you. So it should be the fastest way to make a pipe if you know you want to like volume union everything together at some point. A lot of the times I try to keep everything as simple meshes or simple curves until the end, and then like start adding thicknesses and meshing together. Just keep it light. Yeah, so if everyone has the meshes coming together, the last thing we'll kind of is union it together. So actually make everything one. With the intersect tab, we've done this before, we have a volume union. And this component will take care of merging everything into one continuous volume. With this one, it'll be good to flatten the input just because we want to union everything together. So we need it all on one list. If it's on separate lists, then we'll try to union everything on this list and this list, and then there'll be separate unions. So we'll flatten it to put everything together. Once it's flattened, we can wire both of the volume components into it. You can either use a merge component again, or if you're holding shift while dragging the wire, we should be able to connect both to that volume union.
That second merge, what are the two things that connect to it?
With this one, it is the offset
Okay,
and then just the mesh that's hanging out by itself. Yeah. A different data type. Yeah, a volume that only works with Dendro. So yeah.
Dendrology, the study of trees.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that all wired up, the output from the union should be one Dendro volume. If it's multiple, then you'll need to flatten. It should just be one. At this point, we can do the final steps in Dendro. Visually, it's up to you if you want to smooth, but we could add a smoothing component from Dendro under the filters. Smoothing will just take away some of the hard edges. Up to you though if you want to do this. The only necessary thing to do if you want to export this as an STL is to convert it from a volume back to a mesh. And that again is going to be under the convert. So we converted from mesh to volume, did an operation on it to union it, and then we just want to go back to a mesh before we export. So we can use the volume to mesh component to do that.
It's slightly shiny.
Yeah. Well, yours is special for some reason. It's always shiny, where everyone else is like this ghosted thing. So
mine is shiny too.
nice.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Oh, the last thing, yeah. So that is the volume to mesh. So this will convert it from a volume state back to a mesh that we can bake. So
How do you?
yeah, you could bake the volume smooth and it'll automatically convert it to a mesh, but it's a little bit cleaner to like intentionally turn it back to a mesh in the script. Any of the convert components also need a settings on it. The only difference when you're converting back to a mesh is the settings don't have to be anything special. You can just plug in a new settings value to that and it should work.
You were like,
Yeah.
you
Like within the Dendro work, are you trying to do something?
go in and do extra things.
Yeah. Yeah, technically these two would be the last thing you would ever do. You could do a lot more in Dendro though. You would just always have to have these, like the converting it back to the mesh as the last step. Is that the kind of the question of? Yeah. Kind of. That's true. That's the main thing. Yeah. Brownies are about it. What? No, I'm not answering further questions.
What type of brownie?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I came across a great baking meme this morning where it was there's supposedly a subreddit that just takes screenshots of reviews of baking articles. It's where the person substituted all of their own
Oh,
things
yeah.
and then put 1 star because the recipe failed.
You know this subreddit?
I can find it again.
Please do,
Yeah.
that sounds amazing.
It's like like whenever someone asks a question on Amazon and some people reply, I don't know.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, some people need to hear
I
themselves
love
talk.
those.
Yeah,
You
but
don't do that? I've done that a couple times.
or
I've done it once.
yeah,
Why not?
or the Amazon reviews of like, well,
The person who's like so happy, like, oh, somebody replied, and after there's like, I don't know.
You know what? Well, they can deal with it. I had to look at their dumb questions, so they can look at my comments.
Have you ever seen the reviews of laxative gummy bears?
Well, isn't it, it's like the sugar-free gummy bear, but it's like
Yeah,
it's like a 5-pound bag.
yeah, and
And
it's
it's like-
always the same review, like, I didn't know these were
Uh-huh.
laxative until I like 8, 10 of them.
love
It's like that one artificial sweetener, right? That acts as a
Yeah.
Mm,
like,
yeah. Well, I didn't bring any of those in today. But
But all the cookies.
it looks like some of you have gotten to this step, but we can just use a preview component to give it a nice color, so we can see like physically what's happening.
Just cheated.
Yeah, I guess you could, yeah, Avery, I think you could just change the preview value. Like with the orange button. Is that what you did?
That's
Yeah.
what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, pink's nice. Yeah, if you put no color, it's just a nice pink, like yeah. So once we can see it at this step, we can come back and change the radius value. If you think some of that midsole is too thick, we can change the slider and wait for it to update. So
Can you put like a sub B somewhere to have those very sharp things more like cylindrical, so you get like a more organic shape?
yeah, yeah, it's a good question. Sometimes I do that too. Like if I want to cut things out of my model and keep it sharp, you could do something and then instead of a union, just add a subtraction after that and cut things off. Yeah, that's a good way to work. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, if you type in swatch, you can get a RGB slider. Yeah.
Is that the end of the-
Yep. Yeah. Just
So
get
the
enough color.
subreddit is, didn't have eggs.
Nice.
Didn't have it.
Someone, yeah, Austin, you can put that in the Discord if you find it. Yeah, so that slider that we have should affect that. Yep. Mhm. It'll just take a second to update because of Dendro. It should get back at some point. Yeah, so that's the end of the workflow. There is one thing, like a tip to make Dendro work a little bit better. I'm noticing I have this like small hole here, which happens sometimes. One way I found to fix that is with the original settings component. We can add numbers into bandwidth and adaptivity. For some reason, this works. I'll leave it in the recording. If we do a panel of 10 and 1, let me just lock this. Wiring those into B and A will solve any weird topology issues when you convert back to a mesh.
This is an insane.
but that's a very niche thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's about it. So I'll see y'all next week. What?
You can make your own shoe same way or different. The one what is already there in the.
Oh yeah, the one that's on the side. I made that
Yeah.
the
Okay.
same way. I forget exactly what like setting I used.
Just because of like the bubbles looks so much better or like the sole.
Yeah, it
Um,
looks like you did the same, or it reminds me of what we did at the end of the necklace.
Uh-huh.
Where we smooth it out and then the sharp edges.
It looks more organic.
Yeah, so one thing you could do, so the way this is set up, when we change the slider, it's also changing the settings. The lower the settings value goes, the more voxels you'll have, so the sharper everything will be. So you'll have to come back to the smooth and then just update the iterations value. So at one iteration, it's barely smoothing anything, but if you do like 12 iterations, all those edges will be a lot more smoother.
Okay.
A lot smoother. But just know the lower you go on the diameter of the wires, the lower the voxel setting is going to go. So the sharper everything's going to be. So you would have to make that smoothing value higher to compensate.
Does it work the same as like a sub-key modifier where you take the box and try to round it out like Blender?
Yeah, it's I'm not sure of the exact algorithm, but since we're working with like voxel, like tiny 3D pixels, I think it's just doing like a Gaussian like blur smooth between all of them and then giving you back that geometry. So yeah. So yeah, you're gonna lose detail everywhere. One thing you could do with Blender though, and if you guys want to head out, that's fine. We're just going over weird stuff. But you can create a mask in Dendro. So you could say like keep this area untouched by the rest of the workflow if you want to keep like areas sharp. So you can play with that too, yeah. Yeah, totally. Yep. Yeah, so that's the end of the workflow. I'm gonna stop recording.